after Who Dares Wins. My first film was Who Dares Wins.
Right.
I've got Did Vita and then Robin Sheen.
Right, right. And when he says Did Evita, he means it seriously. Mark was in the original London cast of Evita and played the Che Guevara role for, what, 3 years? Something like that.
2 years. 2 years.
Nominated for the Olivier Award for Elmer Gantry. Guys and Dolls, he can really sing. Okay? No, we're great. We're great, yeah. We are rolling. We're rolling. And in his spare time, Mark wrote a comic book called The Pilgrim, which I was lucky enough to be able to illustrate. He told me that story almost 20 years ago now, and I've been after him ever since to write it down so I could enjoy it myself. We have some high hopes. Oh, and in his spare time, Mark is the creator, author of the brand new tarot system called Wildwood Tarot, which if anybody out here has ever dealt with the tarot, you know the Rider White deck, right?
Oh, I know Wildwood.
Yeah, I was gonna say, blew the Rider White deck off the boards. Was the #1 selling deck for like almost 40 years straight until the Wildwood Tarot came along. So, jack of all trades and master of every damn one of them, which is beginning to piss me off.
Well, what can one say after that? I mean, the legendary Michael. He's taken me into the Cascade Mountains. We've ridden horses together. Us many friends into the mountains, the snow camp. He's tried to kill me about 4 times. Either from, dying of exposure or drinking me into a coma. So, Mike is a legend. A legend. And one of the few people can actually be said you actually have pulled out the 45 during the negotiation. With DC Comics. Which, he's got a different story.
Those first comics.
The legend is when the legend reads better than the truth.
Print the legend.
Yeah. So,
The truth is that the gun didn't come out until after the negotiations were done. And it wasn't because anybody had actually, gotten my vote or anything like that. And I just happened to have it in my briefcase, as you do.
Right.
When you go into a negotiation in Chicago. That was for Sable. I got a call from Chicago Magazine, wanted to know if they could interview me and verify a certain legend that was floating around about me in the comic industry. And I said, would that be the one where I pulled out a gun during negotiations? And they said, well, yeah. So I told them the true story, and that there was silence on the end of the line for a moment, and the lady said, would you mind if we just print the legend? I said, oh, please do.
Yeah, creator of the Warlord, creator of John Sable Freelance, creator of Maggie the Cat, you've done everything from Longbow Hunters, which probably changed the comic industry, didn't it? Longbow Hunters was such a legendary concept, the way they sold it, packaged it was really an adult.
Yes, yeah, it was.
It changed the face of the graphic novel industry for that.
There was other guys working in the industry at that time, like Frank Miller. But yes, there's a brand new Green Arrow TV series coming out called Arrow, and I'm pretty pleased to see that it looks a lot like the Longbow Hunters version of Green Arrow. There's going to be plenty of trick arrows in his bag, I'm sure, but they've got some good people working on it. We actually have a discussion topic we were going to talk about archetypes. And creating archetypes. I was having a conversation with Neil Kaplan and Dean Laurie this morning in the green room, and Neil made a statement that I thought was absolutely true. He said, every story is a personal story.
Yeah.
No matter what you read, and I thought you're actually right. One of the things that makes heroes and heroic stories accessible to people is that we see bits and pieces of ourselves in there. And he pointed out Star Wars as basically the story of a farm boy who, maybe grows up in Iowa and wants to go off to the big city, wants to do something else. And sort of related to that, one of my favorite comparisons is building on archetypes. The archetypal character of you deal with this in Taro, of course. Mark can speak to this with greater authority than I can, but the archetypes of the young hero who seeks out the wise man, challenges his father, right? I mean, the legend is full of stories of the son who must either kill the father or tear down what the father has built, or fulfill the unfulfilled dream of the father, like in the case of Lancelot and Galahad. That's the reason that these stories ring so true with us, is that it strikes this primal chord, something in us can respond to all of that. My favorite examples were, here's a young boy, born on one planet, goes to another planet, discovers he has superpowers of some sort, and now the choice is his how he's going to use them in order to fulfill his destiny. On the one hand, that's Star Wars. On the other hand, it's Superman. And you can flip that around any way you like, or like Neil Kaplan's example, a farm boy from Iowa, just wanting to go to the big city, somewhere where he can break out. And of course, in Star Wars, you have Darth Vader, his very name is like, there was no question at all that it was Luke Skywalker's father, because Darth Vader is Dutch for dark father. Who knew? A lot of people didn't, of course. But in the Wild of Taro, you deal specifically with archetypes.
I do. You want to talk about it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. On the Star Wars thing, though, there's another thing they did which was, I thought was genius, and that was the concept of the lightsaber. I thought that, how do you bring a sword into a modern film and yet retain the archetypal, magical, symbolic relationship to a sword? The swords are so archetypally emotionally linked to the human psyche. It's Arthur, King Arthur, or anything else to see with swords. And so I thought that the idea of the lightsaber is absolutely genius. Absolutely genius. It's a modern, futuristic weapon, but it still has that symbolic and emotional lift. That was a very clever thing.
I saw a bit last week, I think I read it on the BBC, where they were discussing the probability of being able to create a lightsaber, actually make a lightsaber. And it turns out that, of course, the real trick is that, a laser has to have something that reflects back, right? But you don't want this rod sticking out there. You really want another way to do that. And they're working on it. They think that they can... Plasma, right? Yep.
The other problem with plasma, same thing. When you put on a plasma beam, it doesn't just stop 2 feet away from you. It will keep going and burn its way through anything that you have to get rid of.
They're working on a way to use magnetic field flux to keep it from going farther than the 3 feet that you want for a lightsaber.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
I want one so bad. I just really do. On the subject of swords, how many variations are there of the broken sword, the shattered sword, the sword in the tree, the sword in the stone, you know, from the ring, the ring, the nigger room. In the ring, the sword is stuck in a tree. First, it's stuck in a tree, right? And then it's broken. It has to be forged back into a sword. Well, you know, then you've got Tolkien, who used the same thing in Lord of the Rings, and of course you have sword in the stone, and it's all that imagery that it just strikes a chord, and there's a reason why that's always been so popular. You know, it speaks to something deep inside of us, and if you can tap into that,
you got it.
Yeah, you got it.
There are so many archetypal human traits that I think are very important. I think there was two you reminded me actually, a couple of stories. One is, I did a show called The Secret Adventures of Jules Verne many years ago up in Canada. And Michael, who played, was playing Phileas Fogg. There was lots of action. I was a sword master and fight coordinator of the series. And Michael wanted to, in lots of different things, we had to kind of keep reining him back. There was one fight scene where he'd beaten up some guy from the League of Shadows, whatever it was, and he wanted to stamp on the guy. And the director was going, no, you can't stamp on the guy. So I ended up being approached by the producers, and they went, how can we put this into words that we can say to him in a note we can put out to the cast? What's the heroic themes that we're trying to get? And I said it's the James Bond rule. So James Bond never fights anybody that's smaller than him or weaker than him. The bad guy is always bigger, more dangerous, has more guns, has more power, is a much more dangerous person. It's heroic to be fighting the bigger, stronger, more dangerous guy. Even if you have to cheat to win, and use something, you know, like when he kills Oddjob by electrocuting him, that's still heroic. But if the guy looks like a wuss and he kicks the crap out of him, that's not heroic. So I had to write this whole archetypal thing, we say, put out, you know, to everybody, the directors, and going, you can't have the hero of the series stamping on unconscious people until they're dead. That's not heroic. That's just brutal. It's just stupid. So, you know, people get, you know, and sometimes they never tune into it. We did a film called King Arthur in Ireland where Clive Owen was playing King Arthur, and he never quite, and there's lots of discussion. John Matthews came up to the set, was a friend of mine, who also was one of the co-authors of England Tarot. And we tried to get Clive to draw him into the legend, somehow for him to connect with the theme, and he never quite got it. You could see he was struggling with it. And there was one great moment where he's doing a big speech, almost like the speech from Gladiator in the room. And he's got his chance to this great big monumental speech, and he was like, no, I don't want to do this. Didn't feel that it was right. And Ray Winston, my pal, kept Ray went, I'll do it, Clive, get out of the way. I'll do it, give me the speech. And Ray was ready to give the, you know, the Henry V speech, you know what I mean? And those in England are dead tonight will hold their mallet cheek. He was ready to go for the whole thing. And Clive suddenly perked up, realising that Ray was about to nick the seat and did the speech. But it's that, the hero's journey. And one of the best and most simple ways of doing that, King Arthur, the guy that wrote King Arthur also wrote Gladiator, and his name will come back to me now, so I don't know if he's going to come back to me. And we were talking about this heroic story, because I ended up, you know, Keira Knightley on the set, and a whole bunch of guys, Till Schweiger, Mads Mikkelsen, a whole bunch of people. And so we had to get each one of those knights had to have a journey through the story. And I said to him at the time I talked about Gladiator, I said, Gladiator is one of my favourite films. It's such a well-defined, clear piece of writing. And he said, you know what? He said, it's David Franzoni. David Franzoni said, it's very simple. He said, at the start of the film, the hero is going home. That's what the story's about. He says very clearly at the start of the film, all I want to do is go home. And the rest of the journey is him getting home. And at the end of the film, he goes home. And what the rest of it that happens in between is his journey to get home. But he finds home. At the end, he actually dies and goes home. And that's defined, but he starts the film by saying, I just want to go home, I want to go back to Spain, to my son, to my life. And that defines the rest of the film. The rest of the journey, all the rest of the story, is entwined with these different emotional links to at the end. So that, I like a title, theme can be just that, a theme or a trait or a personality trait. And that's why comics book, isn't it? Because that is clearly defined, good, bad, evil, and sometimes you can invert it like you did with Ollie, John Sagan. You can invert it. Tell that story. That's one of my favourite stories about him saying in the show, no, he's this by day and that by night.
Well,
it's a great story, true story.
The whole concept of Sable was that Sable is the exact opposite of every other comic book character you ever read or saw. Bruce Wayne, by day, mild-mannered, fill in the blank, by night, the Dark Avenger. So I turned that upside down. Sable not only is 24/7 Mr. Blood and Guts. You can look in the phone book in the yellow pages under Blood/Guts, and there's a picture of Sable with a gun for hire. And that's the other thing, is that none of this altruism, working for the greater good of mankind. Sable works for money. You gotta pay him. It doesn't matter that much how much you pay him, because he's got the money from his writing career. But you gotta pay him something, because to do it for nothing, you'd have to be nuts. And of course, Sable is nuts. The big, deep, dark secret, no secret identity. The battle mask that he wears is just camouflage paint. I guarantee you, if I put black streaks on my face and go to stick up a bank there, you're gonna, on the evening news, it'll be, short, dumpy cartoonist holds up bank with black stuff on his face. There was a guy who sprayed whipped cream on his face and went in to rob a store, but the whipped cream melted off his face. So by the time he actually gets out the door, his disguise is completely vanished. Yeah. So there was no secret identity. His only deep dark secret is that he's a closet nice guy who writes children's books about a troop of leprechauns living in a fairy mound in Central Park. And the only time he wears any kind of a disguise is when his agent forces him to go to book signings, and he's so embarrassed he doesn't want to show his face in public, so he puts on Harpo Marx wig and a fake mustache and horn-rimmed glasses, and he operates his secret identity is not a secret identity at all, but it's a pen name. He writes under the name of B.B. Flem, F-L-E-M-M. You've written out, it's not bad, but when you say it, it sounds, it's the stuff you hawk out of the back of your throat when you got sinus problems. So ABC got hold of it in the 80s for a TV series, and they went, I don't know, you got it all wrong. See, we got a better idea. Get this. By day, he's a mild-mannered children's author, and then by night, he becomes the Dark Avenger. So they reversed my reverse and made it exactly like every other comic book character thing you ever saw in your life. And the end result was that it was pretty much canceled while the second episode was still on the air. They called up and said, for God's sake, don't make any more of this, okay? But they had a contract for 6 episodes. I got a phone call from the producer, Dick Rossetti, and he said, Mike, I gotta tell you, you were right, we were wrong. Like, yeah, I tried to tell you that before we went ahead with this. And then they thought that they could change horses in midstream. We're gonna make the last 3 episodes just like you wrote it. Oh, thanks a lot, too late. But that's fine. Actually, the failure of that series is probably why we're very close to a movie deal right now. If it had been a successful series, maybe yes, maybe no, you never know. But the best part about that was that Renee Russo made her acting debut as Eden Kendall, and that's well worth it. On the subject of archetypes and the hero's journey, just a little side bit here. I've done several stories, Shaman Steers, at least one episode of Green Arrow where the hero meets an old man who is his teacher. I'm big on old men and young boys always seem to get along really well together, probably because one's at the beginning of his life, the other one's at the end of his life. But it sort of echoes the Luke Skywalker, Yoda kind of a relationship. And I've done these stories. Every time I feature an old Indian character, I always name him Greyhawk. And the reason is real simple. A Merlin is a small gray hawk. And that's my tribute to King Arthur. The teacher is basically represents that same thing, where you have the younger character like either the Luke Skywalker or the Arthur character who meets an old wise teacher who teaches him not by instructing but by making him think. Making him think for himself, making him make his own decisions, and then live by the results that you get. One of the interesting things that I found in Star Wars was that they were able to get into that dark side of Luke Skywalker as well. And you have to have the dark in order for the light to make any sense. Otherwise, it's just goody two shoes.
Shall we have some questions?
You can.
I'll take some questions. If you don't have a question, we'll ask you questions. We'll reverse the...
Did they air the last 3 episodes of Sable?
Yes, they did. They actually, Sable was on the air on ABC 7 weeks because they reran the pilot at the end of that. And the only reason it was on is they didn't have anything else to put in its place. If they had had something waiting in the wings, believe me, they would have pitched it out. In the end, they killed him, sort of, but he came back as the spirit. There's actually a funeral scene for John Sable. He gets shot in the last episode, and there's the actor Louis Van Bergen, very obviously Louis Van Bergen, wearing the spirit's outfit, got the slouch hat and a trench coat, but they were tan. They were like a camel hair trench coat, and they had a tombstone. I wish I had that tombstone. I really do. R.I.P. John Sable. And they had everybody from the cast and the crew, and they asked me if I wanted to come in and be in the shot at the graveyard. I went, no, I don't think so. I'd rather not be part of that. Yeah, it's very strange.
Showbiz,
Yeah,
that's right.
yep. I could have had that on my IMDb page though. Dang it.
Keep on, give me up.
Uncredited. No. Third guy from the left, big nose.
To continue with your archetype theme, do you feel that it is possible to create a truly original story, or by default are we hardwired to automatically default to one degree or another to one of the archetypes?
I'm going to turn that one over to you.
I think it's very, very difficult now to come up with a really original plot. It's very difficult. It's and come up with something. I mean, you can change the furniture if you like, and you can move, you know, but there's certainly human traits. It's one of the things about tarot cards. The major arcana, what they call 22 cards of major arcana, are various states of human awareness or condition, which we all share. We have all felt all the emotions in those 22 cards. So when you're telling the story, and you're working on the graphic novel of the Wild as well, and perhaps even film or something, and telling the story, moving through this mythical world of the Wild, it's difficult to avoid telling those things because they're inherent to human experience. So it's difficult. I mean, like even with Star Wars, however original a concept that was, as Mike has said, it's all taken from either The Ring or something else. You know, it's come from something else. But it's trying to find a different way of telling that story, you know, and put a visual approach to it. In the film Ring, we tried to mix the two together. So you had the archetypal concept of the man that starts really not knowing who he is, or where he's going. And so it's a journey into the unknown. With part of this green man, demonic figure of the forest being his sort of mentor, hovering about over him, with him and behind him. And then Jim trying to understand his relationship with that. So that's part of the story in the film. But again, that it's kind of an archetypal story, but it's just finding a different way of telling it for the new audience will get it. What the interesting thing about my experience with Robin Sherwood is that Richard Carpenter came up with this brilliant idea of adding magic into the Robin Hood legend and adding an Arab character. This character Nazir, which I played, was the first time they put an Arab character as a reflection of society, if you like, into that archetypal history that had been around for 1,000 years. And so today, when I talk to people about that show, I have people coming to me going, that show changed my life. I've never seen anything like that before. It's not that they hadn't seen Robin Hood before. It's not that they didn't understand the legend. It was just a different way of telling it. And adding this other dimension to it, which was the magical part of it. And that is brilliant. It doesn't happen very often. And again, it happened almost organically. When Richard Carpenter passed away about 3 weeks ago, he had a heart attack. He wrote Cat Weasel, he wrote After the Britons, he wrote Ghosts of Motley Hall. He wrote some very successful British shows, as well as Robin Sherwood. And somebody said to me, what do you think Richard's, you know, contribution, or what for you personally, me, what was and I said, you know what his genius was? He was an actor as well. He'd done The Adventures of Horatio Hornblower, he'd been on the BBC War 10. And as an actor, what he did was almost unprecedented. I've never heard about this before, you'll never hear about this again. When Showtime committed to make the show, he wrote the first 3 episodes. And he said, well, we want to see all the scripts. And Paul Lighton, his producer, he said, and Kit wouldn't write them. He said, I've got the storyline. He said, it's a storyline, but I'm not writing the scripts until I see how the actors work together, what the dynamic of them on the set is. So he came out to Bristol when we were shooting, and he basically lived with us for about a month. And he came out with us at night, and Ray, Clive and I, and Mike and everybody, we became very close friends, and we each had our corner of that archetypal relationship. We all knew where we fitted into that little group of the young men, and what our function was. So it develops very quickly. And so Richard Carpenter sat, he would sit with his dinner in pubs and that kind of thing, and he watched that dynamic, how we related to each other, and he wrote it into the next series. So that was the first time. And he called me, and he went, because the character Nazir wasn't supposed to be Nazir, the legend is true, he was supposed to be Edmund the Archer. And he called me up and he went, well, they've changed the name, he's now Nazir, and we've got you for the series, but I don't know what to do with you, have you got any ideas? It's unusual for a writer to call an actor and go, have you got any ideas? And I just finished reading Dr. David Runciman's History of the Crusades, of its 3 volumes. And part of the middle one is about the relationship between the Knights Templar and the Assassins, and how they traded ideas. Although they were supposed to be absolute pitched enemies, the Knights Templar and the Assassins had a trading relationship. And they swapped ideas about medicine, and about navigation and spiritual ideas, all kinds of stuff. So we talked about that and keep that in the back of your mind. We'll put that into that's figured is on the run from the movies. And so that then was filtered into the show. That just would not happen today on a TV show. Just wouldn't happen. They want to have control of everything. The actors are basically just talking furniture. You stand there, you say the lines, that's it. You know. And so it was different. But that was one way. That's one of the few ways I could think of where you could take an archetype like Robin Hood and inject new things into it that, you know, and it's funny because they made a series after that, the BBC did, and they took out the magic, and they thought they were writing a political statement, and it was utterly boring. They took out all the elements that made what the show work, and replaced it with what they thought was trendy stuff, and it was awful, just awful.
But they had an era. But they had
an era, female.
Yep.
And what they've done since, even with Prince of Thieves, the character Azim in Prince of Thieves was based on my character. They just actually were going to call him Nazim, and they took that character out and made him Nazim, not Azim, because they thought that there was now a character in the legend. So we added the character into true. So you can add things in, you can dress it up differently, but at the end of the day, the actual archetypal story of Robin Hood is still Robin Hood, and you can find a different motivation for it.
Did you know that there's a Nazir on the Spartacus show?
No, you joking?
Yeah, no, there is. He's cute. He's a tiny little guy who's one of the gladiators' boyfriends.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
So I'm now adding in that archetype into the Spartacus legend. Okay.
Yeah, there you are. Yep. They started out. I forget what they were calling him. He had been given a Roman slave name, and when he joins the Spartacus band, he says, "My name is Nasir."
Oh.
So he's Nasir now. And he's cute.
Thanks,
Thought you'd like to know that.
I'm now a gay icon. Is that what you're trying to tell me? As well as being an Arab icon.
Yeah. One of the reasons why you find, I think, why you find the best adaptations and usages of the archetypes are when you have a writer like Kip Carpenter who puts so much of himself into it as well. Agatha Christie said, when you read a book, you get 10% plot, 20% characterization, and 70% whatever the writer knows best. Right. And the writer usually knows himself best. I make no bones about it. I mean, I write. People used to ask me, what kind of an audience do you write for? I said, I write for an audience of one. I write for me. I write the kind of stories that I would like to read, and I'm just lucky that I've struck a chord somewhere along the line, and I've managed to appeal to enough people to keep me fed and a roof over my head over the years. Before I go rambling on, more questions. We actually do have a little bit more time, but anybody? Pops? Good question. Probably right about the time the movie gets made.
Yeah, it's annoying, but in the middle of all of that collapse and everything, financial and otherwise, comic books sort of went, sideways, and we sort of stuck. The rights have reverted. I got the rights back, and we are talking to the people about finishing it. And one of the other projects that grew out of that was I'm going to write a novel. It was set as a episode. That it was going to be the program. It was going to be a 6-issue, the first issue, then the second and third one. And so the second one, which I already plotted out the story for, which was a Chinese story for me, I will write that as a novel. In the meantime, we're trying to find somebody that might see finish it to help the world further. Because after it's finished, Mike had actually done the drawings for the third one. So it's already drawn and finished half the cover. So the thing is already done, ready to go. And it was all written and everything. So we were trying to find, we had to pull ourselves out of a little bit of the situation with comics, which sadly was held up stuff. There is a conspiracy theory.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Which I did a radio show in Los Angeles called Combat Radio, and somebody sent a question about the pilgrim, which I can't deny. In the original story, at the end of the story, one of the plots was that the character, Tom Dillon's character, I don't know if you know this, but this is true. At the beginning, both in the Gulf War and in the First Gulf War, both the Brits and the Americans had psychics trying to locate what first time it was Saddam Hussein, and then psychics trying to find the location of Osama bin Laden. The British had admitted, Ministry of Defence admitted, yes we did, we had a team of psychics trying to locate it. Now that sounds wacky, but let me tell you, it's true, because during the Second World War this is what the Brits did against the Nazis. And John Matthews and I are writing a book at the moment called The History of the Military Occult Compact, because the occult, magic and the military thing have gone together hand in hand on many occasions. So they're using psychics, and the new storyline is that Dillon's on the run because they actually found out where Osama bin Laden was. And nobody was ready for dealing with that. And so at the end of it, we kind of gave away where he was. And there is because I've been told some years ago that people knew where he was, they just wanted to come out. And so in the original one, we were going to go tell people where he was. And so because we were going to do that, apparently it was one of the reasons it was cancelled, because they didn't know. Somebody actually asked me that seriously, said, is that true? Is that real, or is that a conspiracy theory? In the program, you actually said he's in Pakistan. And I said, I cannot deny that, because I'm now going to have to rewrite the email. So, there you go. Funny old book. But that was one of the main threads of the story. There was lots of other threads in there as well, but I have to read that. You don't want to check the next one, the normal one would be about China.
It's not the first time that writers have jumped the gun on the history books. During World War II, Milton Caniff, who was doing Terry and the Pirates, twice had them knock on the door from the FBI. They wanted to know how it was that he had foretold the invasion of Burma, and had the dates correct and everything else for the invasion of Burma. And the other time was that on D-Day, he actually had a script where he talked about an invasion. He used the word Operation Overlord, and he had two of the code names for the beaches. Now, whether they assigned that after the fact, or because it was a very popular script with the military, or if it was just something that he twigged to almost by process of osmosis. He had an inside track, deep knowledge on what was going on, because he was the fair-haired boy. Everybody in the military loved Milton Caniff. He's a staunch supporter of the American military, Army, Air Corps, and everything else. So they would talk to him. He designed patches that are still in use today. You know, the shoulder patches, and did that just as a freebie and a thank you to the military for them cooperating with him. If he wanted to take a look at a new airplane, they were glad to take him out and let him fly. You know, no problem at all. So because he had that inside track, he was able to incorporate all that stuff. And Mark, in his other guys, knows people who do this stuff for a living. You know, if you're looking for the authority on the intelligence game, this is the guy. You know what we're all about, is it right? Okay, one or two. So,
some of the great stories, some of the most interesting stories to me, are the one that sounds crazy but true. For instance, I'll give you this one. And if you ever read, I highly recommend that you go back and read the Bond books, the actual original Ian Fleming Bond books. They are bloody brilliant. And you can see that he's writing exactly what Miles just said. He's writing what he knows about and what he finds interesting. And so it's across the social spectrum. Great stuff. And the reason I'm saying that because I was just rereading Goldfinger again. And from Washington Blood, I wrote more of it, but from Washington Blood. And Red Grant, who is the character from Washington Blood, who is played by Robert Shaw, the first third of that book, that one book written by Ian Fleming, is telling you about Red Grant, and he builds this character into this invincible sociopathic monster. The whole book tells you the history of this character. This is the guy that James Bond is going to end up fighting with at the end of the book. But before you get to the end of the book, the first third of the book is you going, this guy is unbeatable. Red Grant is a complete sociopathic nutcase. So when Bond actually gets to fight with him, there's a real chance that Bond is not going to survive. This guy's going to kill him. And it's brilliantly written. But Fleming was a member of Naval Intelligence. And his elder and smarter brother, Peter Fleming, worked directly to Winston Churchill. And there was a group called the London Controlling Section. And the London Controlling Section was an intelligence organisation. Even I didn't know, I only found this out recently when I was working on the new book. I thought they'd ended at the Second World War, but in fact they didn't. There are actual files from the London Controlling Section going all the way up to the formation of NATO. So they didn't shut it down.
Yeah.
They kept it going because of this psychic research thing. And so what happened was, this agency's job was to roll into all the intelligence operations in the UK psychological bits that would trick the Germans into thinking something else. And because the SS was mostly an occult organisation, they were all occultists, they used magical ideas to trick the Nazis into thinking we were going to do one thing and we were going to do something else. And it was obviously the most important thing was D-Day, getting the truth ashore. So Peter Fleming, the brother of Ian Fleming, was involved with all of that work. So Ian Fleming got a lot of his ideas from Peter, his brother, who worked for Churchill himself. So fact is stranger than fiction. And when we started writing the program, just to give you a little odd thing, there's a character in there called Colonel King Seymour. And Colonel King Seymour really did exist. He was one of the major magicians that was brought in by the London Controlling Section to wage magical warfare, specifically on the SS and Himmler. And he was an ex-intelligence agent from very early on, from the Boer War to the First World War, and he was brought back from retirement to work for this London Controlling Section. And Colonel King Seymour died in the middle of a magical occult rite in 1943. And of course the thing was that he had been assassinated possibly by the Germans. But it was so important they didn't want anybody to know what had happened to him. I actually managed to track down where he's dead. And he's buried in an unmarked grave in a cemetery in Western London. And the name of the grave is actually a female. He's buried under a woman's name. When you actually get into the records in the cemetery, which they shouldn't have shown, because she's supposed to be around the family, but she didn't. Nobody Irish woman. I explained to her what we were doing, and he was Irish, she said, oh, I shouldn't show you this one. So here you go. And he's buried under a woman's name, but it actually says in this grave, is Colonel King Seymour died August 1943, blah, blah, blah. So he's in the grave, but they hid. Where they buried him was the little Nazi to know how he died and where he was. So truth is weirder and stranger than fiction. That's the other thing we talk about archetypes. You know, truth is much stranger than we could make stuff up that we know has happened. You know, when we were shooting at NASA, another quick story. I know you want to ask questions, but I'll just listen quick. I was stood next to I'm very lucky and honoured to have been filming on the launch pad 39 at Cape Canaveral. So there's me, Barry, Shire, about 4 of the guys. And we were stood next to Endeavour, literally Endeavour on the pad. It was about to take off the following week. And some of the NASA guys were coming up going, you know how lucky you are. You're never going to see this again, because when it flies, it's going to become a museum. So we're like, oh, great. And they went, how did you get clear to be here? Because these guys, the NASA guys, aren't allowed to do this. So we stood there chatting away. And he's talking about the shuttle program, and he said, you know, it's very sad, it's the end of the shuttle program. I said, no, it's not. No, it's not. He went, well, what do you know about that? I said, you've got one in orbit right now. Black program. He went, what do you know about that? I said, the 37B, you've had a 37B shuttle in orbit right now. And he went, what else do you know about that? I said, it launches from here, it lands at Vandenberg Air Force Base, it's a shuttle program which has got no humans involved. You may not know this, but I invite you to go and look it up online. There's an entire shuttle program called the 37B. You pay for it, we pay for it. It's half the size of the shuttlecraft that we have now. It's completely remotely piloted. So it can stay in orbit for 9 months at a time. And as that one goes up from Cape Canaveral, one lands at Vandenberg. And it's a complete map program. You can look at it, you look through the research, it's there. Okay? So we do have a shuttle in orbit right now. And there's one lands at Vandenberg, one takes over. And he said, what else do you know about? So we started talking about these other aircraft that I probably shouldn't talk about yet. And they were like, that's amazing. I said, it's there. If you go and dig into the research, it's not impossible to find out. It's just you have to be interested to find out. There's all kinds of stuff flying about that we pay for it. Those people don't even know exist. Fascinating stuff.
One more question. Anybody? There you go. What kind of what?
Project.
Both of us? Or me? I'll take it first. I'm waiting for word from an editor who's reviewing my second Sable novel, prose novel, right now. He's just started reading it, wrote me an email a couple of days ago saying that he really, really likes it. If his publisher really, really likes it, then we're good to go. There will be another Sable graphic novel. It's called Rules of the Hunt. The timing on that is kind of up in the air right at the moment. And I'm in discussions with an outfit that wants me to do a series of graphic novels based on an alternative history world, basically set in the mid-13th century in Northern Europe with Mongols and a combination of martial arts and rapier and dagger, which is very strange. But hey, yeah, as long as the check clears, I'm your guy.
It's an interesting eclectic mix at the moment. I've been doing a radio show called Combat Radio, and you can download it on the internet. You can actually listen to it on the internet as well. I guess it's what they call Sirius, but it's called LA Talk Radio, it's called Combat Radio. And we did a series of shows. We started with 6 about conspiracy theories and all kinds of stuff. And we've had everybody on. It's been fantastic. We had Dean Hagland, who was one of London from the X-Files. We had Adrian Paul on, who was Highlander. We had Juliet Landau on, who was in Twilight, who was in Buffy. And we had some great guests from John Matthews. You've been on, you've actually called in as well. So the shows are very eclectic and a lot of fun to do. So I'm looking forward to doing more of that stuff. We will be doing more of that. And you can literally go online and go LA Talk Radio, Ethan Denmeyer, and listen to the shows now. They're archives, you can go back to the shows and listen to it, which is great fun. But I'm going to fly to the UK next month to do a workshop, a Wildwood Tarot workshop, and do a book signing on this. So we're going to do a weekend event, Matthews and I. I've got a book called the Secret History of the Geocal Complex, which is being looked at by HarperCollins right now. This is all stuff we just talked about, maybe Second World War, but some stuff right up to date about what they call now synthetic telepathy. And we've actually developed a system which is called voice to skull, whereby they can beam a microwave beam at your skull and it resonates. You will hear a voice in your head as if it's the voice in your head. Your skull will resonate to this. It's a military system which now is being developed for battlefield communications. It's been around a while, but it's had other uses, let's put it that way. But literally, it can beam a microwave beam in your head, and your skull will resonate. And you will hear a voice as if it's somebody talking to you.
That explains the voices.
That
explains.
Absolutely true. Somebody's got a lot so there's that book, and the other book is one called Hero Weapons of Film and Television. And over my stage career, I've been lucky to handle things like the original pulse rifles that they made for aliens. That was made by Baptiste, designed by Baptiste in London. So, which was actually a Thompson submachine gun with a shotgun strapped underneath it. Weapons like Madonna, these swords. We were doing different genre weapons that were hero weapons, and like Walker PPKs. The history of Walker PPK. Why did he choose that one? And why it became an iconic weapon for the conflict? But bows, arrows, swords, and the futuristic weapons. And the history of you see the Star Wars Rise of Stormtroopers. You see that little gun that they're carrying about, that they have, that blaster?
Yeah.
Well, that was in the military, that was actually a Sterling submachine gun. And so when they started shooting in London, they needed a bunch of weapons that all looked the same, but they could dress up. It's absolutely true, to make it look. So the actual weapon, the blaster that the Stormtroopers are carrying, is actually a Sterling submachine gun with a short 15-round magazine in it, and the actual, the stock, which was a folding stock, is just clipped underneath the front of the weapon. That's why it was designed. So that's why it looks like that. That thing underneath it is actually a folding stock. And they just stuck bits onto it so that it didn't look like a Sterling. So that, we go through the Star Wars weapons and talk about what was used for that. So that's the book that we're trying to get off the ground at the moment, the secret history. Not, well, how weapons go from being the designer's idea practically carried out on the set. The Pulse rifle is one of the best examples, but there's many others. And obviously being involved with sword stuff, I've designed and built and bound swords for people in the film, so that's really fascinating as well. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. And we're trying to get the Wildwood Tarot graphic novel off the ground as well. It's based on the system of Wildwood Tarot. So
the storyline I came up with is really, really cool. It fits so in with the young adult audience right now. I think the parallel, maybe the closest parallel I can think is Hunger Games. With the success of that, it's pretty much a slam dunk. The story of the character is a young girl who's cast into this mystical world of the Wildwood, and it's really a terrific story. Graphic novel, movie, I'm up for anything. Movie. I wrote a screenplay for Sable, and we're about that far away from signing a deal.
This is good.
Yeah. So with a little bit of luck, next year this time we'll have something more to talk about. If this was actually, with a little bit of luck, next month we'll have a lot more to talk about. But Grandma said, spit in one hand, wish in the other, and see which one fills up the fastest. And Grandma cleaned it up for us kids. But anything can happen from here. But as a result, I've already gotten some action on Maggie the cat. So cross fingers and toes and hope for the best.
About time, I say. It's Mike Grell's time. That's what I've been saying for 5 years. That time, your turn.
I'm a man for all seasons, but can't think of any reasons, actually.
Well, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. I believe we're done.